Well, we are thrilled on the Baby Boomer Report today. I mean, beyond thrilled to have a legend, a true legend. And all you have to do is say Cousin Brucie, and everybody goes, oh my God, it's Cousin Brucie. Bruce Morrow, thank you so much for being a part of the Baby Boomer Report. Needless to say, this is a big day for all of us that listen to you and have you on the show.
Cousin Tony, as a fellow boomer, and I've been a boomer for a long time, right? Anyway, I thank you so much for the telephone call and the live line and the pods and the audience. That's very important. You and I are reaching a wonderful audience.
We certainly are, and I tell you, we'll get to this at the end. But my goodness, you are still just a juggernaut of energy, and still on the radio. And when I listen to you on Sirius XM, it's amazing how many people still call you and still refer to you as the Cuz, and you spend time with them on the phone.
Tony, what's wonderful, what's happened, besides my audience who grow up with me and their children and maybe even their grandchildren, it's been a long time. But now this whole new audience that I'm reaching, with this new technology, like what you're using technology and I'm using technology, we're reaching places, little places that have never, been Cousin Brucie listeners or even heard of me. But now I have a whole new family. And it's been, many years I've been doing the satellite, and it's developed into something quite amazing. And I'm probably busier today than I've been in my entire career.
Wow, there's a lot to be said for that. We'll circle back to that. But where did the Cousin Brucie part come in? How did you latch on to something like that? That I mean, just really took off.
I know. It's interesting you said the word latch. I think that's a great description of it. When you look for something and you try to find something, it usually doesn't happen. The best things in life happen when you're not looking for it and you don't expect it. But when you identify it, you grab it. That's what happened with me. I was in the studio one day. I was on WINS radio in New York City, which is now an all-news station. But in those days, it was the really precursor of top 40 AM radio, doing all rock and roll in the early days. And one day, I was on the air as Bruce Morrow. It's my, most people think my last name is Brucie. They call me Cousin. My first name, Brucie's the last. So it's Bruce Morrow. So I'm on the air, spinning records in those days. We played 45s and things like that. And a security guard came over to me in the studio. And in those days, we used to have people come in the studio, people would visit who weren't afraid that somebody was going to do something stupid. So he brought a little old lady with twinkling eyes, and he said to me, is it all right if she talks to you? She seems to be in trouble. Now, I was always on the evening, and kind of used to, people coming in for help. And this lady obviously needed some help. So I said to him, man, come on, sit down. I queued up my record now I don't know if you remember what that is, Tony. But
I remember.
You used to take a record and go back and forth until you got the opening of the record, then you hit the button. Today, of course, everything's digital. You don't even have to think it. You can think it happens. So this little old lady sat down, and I said, yes, ma'am, my record's playing. Can I help you? She said, yes, and she says to me, looking at me right in the eyes, very, very smart. When you want something, you look at somebody's eyes, right? And she melted me. And she said, do you believe we're all related? Now listen to this. Do you believe we're all related? And I said, yes, ma'am. She said, well, cousin, lend me 50 cents to get home. I'm broke. That's exactly what happened. So I said, excuse me for a moment. And I knew, look, I'm a kid from Brooklyn, New York, by way of Lubbock, Texas. And I knew right away when somebody wanted money from me. So I queued up my next record, and I said, yes, ma'am. So you need 50 cents? She says, yeah, cousin, I'm broke. We're related. I came to you. So I gave her the 50 cents, and she thanked me very sweetly, and she said, thank you, cousin. Someday I'll pay you back. Just like that. And she left. Well, I continued my show. That night on the way home, I lived in Brooklyn. In the middle of the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, a light went on in my head. Not on the wall, but in my head. And it said, boing, that's it. That's what you've been looking for. Cousin. She called you cousin. Everyone loves their cousins. Cousin Bruce, Cousin Brucie. That's exactly how it was born, Tony. Now, there's a postscript. Would you like the postscript?
I would love the postscript.
She never paid me back.
That was my next question.
Yeah, no, but I think if you really think about it, examine it, I owe her a few dollars.
Well, yeah, the way I see it, that moniker of Cousin Brucie cost you 50 cents. That's not a bad deal.
No, not yet, but in those days it might have been worth 65 cents. Yeah,
I remember. I remember as a
but then the Cousin Brucie thing just caught on like fire immediately. Everyone loves to go visit their cousins, Tony. They always have the best toys. And your aunt and uncle with the cousins' parents always spoil you the most. So everyone loves their cousins.
Well, they do, but not only that, but it also lended itself to really it was a marketing genius. You were like a marketing genius. I mean, when you think back, and we're going to hear some of the jingles that they were doing for you.
Look, I thank you so much for saying that, but I wish it was true. It just was natural. It wasn't anything that I was engineering to do. I didn't even realize how important it would become in my life.
Yeah.
Right? So I wish I could accept that as an answer. But the answer was I walked into it, I found it, and I identified it. And I don't know if that's genius or not, but it worked.
Well, I remember, it being a little boy in Paterson, New Jersey, and listening to you on the radio, and then moving to South Florida, and you were, and correct me if I'm wrong with the vernacular of this, Cousin Brucie, but you were on a clear 50,000 watt station, so in South Florida, I could hear you late at night. And
yes,
I remember getting old, when I was getting older and still heard you, and hearing the jingles, the Cousin Brucie jingles by, like, when Frankie Valli did it, I went, man, this guy's got some serious juice to be able to get Frankie Valli to do that for him.
Well, in those days, first of all, we all needed jingles. It was part of the top 40 package. All identification was like a cake. You have the basic cake, and then you have to fill it with layers, and you have to put some whipped cream and flowers and candles on it. And that's what really jingles meant. And the jingle sort of made it, it finished the cake beautifully.
Come on, let's go, go, go. What a groovy show. Come on and go, go, go. With Cousin Brucie.
And Frankie Valli and Bob Cordio were friends and fans. I played their music ever since I was on the air. So they came up one night and said, we have a gift for you. And they literally brought me a 5-inch reel of tape. In those days, we used to play tape on tape recorders.
Yep.
And they did the Cousin Brucie theme for me as a gift at one of their sessions. And that was probably one of the best presents I've ever received. That theme is still on the air with me, still with me.
Yeah, I can recall it, and you hear that high pitch of Frankie Valli. Do you were in the cusp and in the heat of a very vital time in rock and roll music, and there was also, it was a tempestuous time, especially for disc jockeys, for guys like you, who were referred to as the disc jockey, and you stood alone. I mean, you were there. There was Alan Freed. There were a couple other guys. But
they're all gone.
Yep, they're all gone, but you're still standing. Did you
that's
know?
Right. Someone said that exactly. Someone said, "Hey, Brucie, you realize you're the last man standing?"
Yeah.
I don't want to think about that.
But did you
I don't
realize?
know that.
Did you realize at the time the kind of power you wielded? I mean, because you were helping. I mean, when I tell the audience that you had the power where, when McCartney or Brian Wilson or Frankie Valli or Mick Jagger, I mean, go on and on and on, Brenda Lee, Leslie Gore would come into town, they'd call Bruce right away. That was their first phone call.
Right. We either had lunch or dinner or they come on the air. But to answer that question, the answer is innocently no, not at the beginning. I don't think any of us realized the powerhouses we were creating. But then as time went on, it became very obvious at the influence we had on this audience. And fortunately for my audience and for me, I realized this at a very early age, that I had a great responsibility. And I'm one of those broadcasters that I'm kind of corny and I'm kind of old-fashioned, and I like to call myself traditional. And I realized the influence and the responsibility I had to an audience, and the audience which I still love to this very day. So I'm always very careful what I said. And if if I try to sell you a car or a pimple cream, you know that I tried it. Right? I tried that. If I sent you to a movie, I saw that movie. If I sent you to a restaurant, I tried that pizza. Right? And you knew that was, you believed me, I had credibility, and I was very covetous of this honesty. And I still am, Tony, to this day. I'm very aware of what I say and the influence that I yield.
Can you tell us, shed some light, and hopefully you can kind of pull the curtain back a little bit with some of the great rock and roll artists that you had an opportunity to spend time with, that you're still, in some of which they're still with us, stay in touch with, whether it's the Beatles or the Beach Boys or, like I mentioned, Leslie Gore, on and on and on. Can you talk a little bit about them and their personalities and what they meant to you in your career and what you think you meant to them and theirs?
Well, to this day, I'm very, very close with those of these recording artists that are still with us. I still play their music, so I can go back. I mean, in the early days, Elvis Presley paid me a visit, and I remember I was over at NBC at that time, and they sort of snuck him up in an elevator because this poor guy couldn't even take a taxi. It was that bad. So they wrapped him up in a blanket. I didn't know what was coming into my studio. They didn't announce him. They said they had somebody special coming in, and there it was. There was Elvis. And he came up and he said to me, he didn't call me cousin, he called me sir. He was very, very polite. And he said, thank you, sir, for playing my records. And we went on the air a little bit, and then he wrapped him up again in this blanket and took him away. And that was one of them. I always remember it's funny while we're talking about this, people just dropping into the studio, because everybody did, from politicians to great stars.
So Bob Hope and Jackie Gleason walk into your studio one day.
Well, it was Bob. I see Bob Hope first, and then I see Jackie Gleason. Now, you can imagine. I mean, I'm very rarely tongue-tied. I've met everybody from presidents, way down. And the door opened, and there's Jackie Gleason and Bob Hope walk into my studio, and I went like that. I got tongue-tied. I put a record on. I really got a little nervous. I didn't know what. Suddenly they walked in, and what it was is he was doing. Bob Hope was doing one of his specials, and it came from Central Park, and he said to me, "There's nobody better than you to give us a little lesson." He said, "One of our skits tomorrow, Jackie and I'm going to be a disc jockey on the air. I'm going to emulate you, and Jackie's going to be one of my fans or something." And he said, "Can you teach us how to do this?" On the air. And I did it. We did it on the air. I had him reading commercials, both of them. I had him introducing records. I corrected them. And then at the end of the session, which lasted about an hour, they were there with me, he said to me, "You know what? I'm not going to pay you, but this is what I'm going to do with you. I'd like you to come down tomorrow afternoon at Central Park. You're my guest on my TV special." So he had me, he gave me a little spot on his TV special, introduced me, and treated me very nicely. So that was kind of a fun thing, too. And then, of course, you have everybody from, as you said, Frankie Valli, the Beatles, Paul McCartney. I see him every once in a while when the Beatles were around. I used to talk to them. I interviewed them on my shows. They used to call me on my phone. Mick Jagger. They all did. These people were always very appreciative of what my involvement was, and I guess they liked me. I was a regular guy.
Yeah.
A regular guy doing my thing, and then they got a kick out of me. So I had the opportunity of meeting just about everybody.
Did you have any?
I mean, I've met them all.
Did you have any idea? Did you have any idea, Bruce, that the Beatles would become the lasting legacy that they've become?
No. I wish I had that knowledge. I remember I started receiving their records in about 1962 from Europe. And this was, I was aware of them because they were causing all kinds of riots and scenes all over Europe. But I had no idea that they were going to become so iconic. No idea. In fact, they were the very first group that I ever got involved with, that their sociological influence had more to do with us than their music. The music was great, but the social part was even more important. How they dressed, the way they wore their hair, the British influence on our language. You want to hear a cute story? This is kind of a fun story, and this illustrates exactly what I'm saying. I'm on the air. I think it was WA Beatlesy. Before we became WA Beatlesy, we even latched on to that. And a guy here, 2 weeks before the Beatle arrived, this guy calls me and says, "Hey, Brucie, this is Johnny O'Brien from the Bronx. I live in the Grand Concourse, Brucie. Love you, man. Would you play a record for me and my girl? Her name is Suzette. Play anything you want." All right. 2 weeks later, the Beatles are there. And all heck broke loose. I mean, everything. Everything was Beatles, right? The same guy. Listen to this. "Hello? Hi, this is Cousin Brucie." "Hello, is this His Lordship, Cousin Brucie? This is Sir Johnny O'Brien of Bronxshire. Would you mind playing a record for me and me bird? Her name is Lady Suzette. I want a Beatles record, please. Tell her I love her so much. Thank you, old chap. Ta-ta. God bless the Queen." Hangs up. This is exactly what was happening. Suddenly, everybody was becoming an Anglophile. It was quite amazing. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing, feeling, seeing a Beatle or a Beatle paraphernalia. It was quite amazing. So to answer that record, your original quest about the records and everything, no. I had no idea that it was going to happen. It became obvious very quickly, very soon, that this was going to become more than just music, and it was going to be more than, as a lot of critics suggested, a 6-month flash in the pan. I mean, here we are, how many years later? Look what happened. Still hugely important and greatly influential, not only on the audience, Tony, but also on the music industry to this day.
It's remarkable to think they were only together 8 years.
That's right. In fact, honestly, it wasn't even 8.
Yeah.
It was a little oversized. Approaching 8, but around 7. It was really very quick. So how do you figure that out? Well, at that time in our history in the United States and the world, we needed something desperately. We needed something intellectually and emotionally and sociologically. And suddenly these 4 mop tops come along that are stimulating the interest and emotions of people, kids all over Europe. Well, here in the United States, we needed a smile. We needed something to laugh about and smile about and party about. We're in the midst of all kinds of terrible situations. We had assassination. We had political strife. Racial strife was terribly at its peak. Still is going on, but at least I think the Beatles and rock and roll have helped put a balm on it a little bit and made us aware of how we have to react and how we have to act. But if it wasn't for people like the Beatles, we'd still be in a heck of a mess. Yeah. Still be in a heck of a mess.
Would you
I always have to think about how much we owe them, not only for the galaxy of music, but for what they did for us historically.
Would you agree that the Beach Boys were the American counterpart to them in terms of popularity and influence?
I'd say that's very close to the truth. A lot of people. So Beach Boys, I think the Four Seasons would be right up there with them, and but all these other groups, the groups that we grew to love, like the Drifters and Elvis, and people like that, and Tom Jones. I mean, it was not just one or two groups. It was a salad, a collage. But the influence, you'd have to say Beatles and Beach Boys would probably be right up there on top. Rolling Stones very close too. So it's really just more than just one musical entity. It's an ice cream cake with a lot of cookies. Right.
Bruce, what is it that still energizes you? What is it that still drives you? You said now, and if I may be so bold, you are now into your 7th decade, right? 70 years old and plus, maybe?
Well, I don't even want to think about it. There must have been a mistake. Because I still feel like, I'm in my 30s or 40s. I still feel like I just got my lucky break about 10 years ago, and I'm on my way. Because, when that light goes on, in the studio and it says, "Brucie, you're on the air," I still have that great, wonderful feeling in the pit of my stomach of excitement. The excitement of reaching people, touching people, getting involved with people's lives. That remains today. I never thought this would happen. Who knew that it was going to last all this time? But what excites me today, Tony, which I think what you were getting at, is the new technology that we're going through. We're just tipping the iceberg, as you know. This is an amazing time to be alive. What's going to be happening in the next decade will be quite amazing. It's allowing me to reach a new audience. I'm reaching my audience, I'm reaching their kids, and I'm reaching their kids' kids. So if you ever listen to any of my Cousin Brucie shows, you'll hear a 9-year-old on the air with me.
Yeah.
And then you'll hear his grandfather, who might be 87 or 88, right? And then everything in between. And I'm reaching people from all different geographical areas. That's what excites me to this day. I mean, it was wonderful, doing very well and reaching millions of people in the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania area. But now I got the entire nation. I have Canada, and I have all the ships at sea and all the islands, this whole hemisphere. So the idea of reaching people in the Philippines, listening to me, and it's the next morning, and talking to me about their problems and what they love about the Beatles and the Four Seasons, turns me on. And that's what keeps me going. That's what makes me very excited, and the energy is huge. But the energy really comes from that audience. That audience stimulates me.
That's what makes your show on Sirius XM to this day so special, because as good as all the technology is, and I totally agree with you, the technology has also eliminated the personality of a Bruce Morrow or any other disc jockey that really made an impact into the world of rock and roll. You have maintained that. And I think that if you could share just one or two with us, you still have that relationship with the audience, which to me is amazing, but a relationship where in many cases you have helped them through really difficult periods of time. You've also helped them when they just got married or whatever. I mean, they call you with sometimes the most intimate details of themselves so that you can help them.
I get people whose father or a spouse passed away that day, and they'll call me for solace. They'll call me to talk to me, which means I've been accepted, in families. And I think that's really... that's what keeps me going, keeps me wanting to continue doing what I'm doing. I was going to say, my shows, as you know, if you've listened to me, you said as a young boy, and I think you said Patterson, growing up in Patterson, have evolved into something different. Years ago, whereby it was music, time, weather, a jingle, a contest, that kind of thing. But nothing, my voice made it very personal. I always had that way of reaching on a one-on-one basis. I learned that a long time ago, how to get the warmth and the personal touch through a microphone. But today, the audience demands something different. I have evolved. The Cousin Brucie shows have evolved. I call it almost a variety show. This year I was very proud. I think it was Radio Inc., one of the major... communications networks, magazines, gave me Talker of the Year award.
Wow.
Now, that's when I got that letter, I was so thrilled. Because, that shows that it's recognized what I'm doing today.
Yeah, validates it for sure.
Yeah, I'm talking a lot. And this is what the audience wants. In other words, anybody can play I Want to Hold Your Hand by the Beatles, or Day Tripper, or play a Rolling Stones record, or Elvis, and talk about the great times I had at Palisades Park. But they want more. They demand more out of their media today. They want that human touch. They want that connection. So my being their friend has become very real, and I've been accepted in people's homes, and I would say bathtubs, bathrooms, supermarkets, cars, you name it, I'm in there.
Yeah, and you're still doing.
I probably take more showers and baths for people one night than anybody else.
That's a great way to put it. I never thought of it that way, Bruce.
Well, it is. It's very well. What I'm being a little silly about is that it's become a very personal touch. Everything I do is extremely personal, which you mentioned when you first started talking this segment. It is so personal. I've accepted that, and fortunately for me, I love it. I love the idea how personal it has become.
And you're still doing, like, for lack of a better way of putting it, concerts. I think within the last couple of years, aren't you doing something like at Palisades Park? And you're having, the turnout has been remarkable, probably even more than you would have expected.
Oh, absolutely. In any kind of weather, they're there. Yeah, we do Palisades. I do a show at the Garden State Theater, which is called the PNC Theater, where we'll have 13 to 15,000 people at a pop, and I'll present the music, but I talk to them. I open every show I wanted to figure out, how do I open a personal show, because I do a lot of personal appearances, but how do you open a show and get the same feeling that you do of what we're doing right now, talking to people, and it's very personal. I'm personal with you, you're personal with me, and I know it's reaching people. I know they're feeling warmth, and they're feeling that they're getting something that they don't normally get. Well, what I do is I generally start at the top of this theater, which is up in the clouds. That's how big this place is. And I'll walk down and touch hands and hug. Mm-hmm. And I'll take 15, 20 minutes before I get on the stage, just kissing people and letting them hug. Very important. Touching people. I knew that right from the beginning of my career, that somehow we have to touch this audience. Yeah. Otherwise, we're just a bunch of tubes and wires.
You know, Bruce,
but touching is very important.
And you do touch them, and because of that, I need to ask you this. So we have a number of, everybody that listens to you pretty much, I mean, the majority of them, while it does span the spectrum, as you said, because you're reaching different people now, a different demographic, it's still the baby boomer is the predominant listener to Cousin Brucie. And your age and my age, we're still going strong. And I think it's important that the baby boomers listening to this, who listen to you, understand that, when you become AARP age and Medicare age, that life doesn't stop, that you can still be productive, that you can still be of a value to a community, to an industry, whatever the case might be. And I believe you really do strongly represent that for how you are still going strong and still influencing people.
Absolutely. A great part of my audience is they're retired. I always want to know what they did, when they did what they did, and they tell me. And then we talk about retiring, and I always insist that they don't sit on the porch and watch the grass grow, that they get involved somehow with their community, use some of the skills, because almost everybody has a skill. And to help other people, now's their time. Because this particular generation, this baby boomer generation, they have a tremendous amount of power, great influence, great financial power, and I don't think a lot of them realize that. And it's a great collection, and it's been a boom to me. And I know a boom to you, too. This whole generation that we call baby boomers are one of the most amazing generations to come along in many decades. They have energy. They still have energy. They learned what to do the hard way. We went through some very tough times with wars and political strife, racial strife. So this particular generation is very powerful and very strong. We learned the hard way. And the best thing about it now is that we were able to exercise this power. And I keep reminding people that the power is there. Don't sit down. Let it go. Use it.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. All right. So the most requested song you get on the radio still today?
Oh, that's a tough one. All right. Well, one of the biggest comes from the group of Vietnam veterans. And we got to get out of this place, the Animals. Uh-huh. Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. They've adopted that song.
Wow.
We got to get out of this place is the last thing we ever do. I mean, it's a very powerful song. So invariably every night I get several requests for that.
Yeah. Actually, I think the Buffalo Springfield song is one of the most powerful songs that I think is still applicable today.
Which one? Something's Happening Here?
Yeah, Something's Happening Here.
Oh, yeah. See, a lot of the songs, a lot of people call it protest music. Like last night I played something, somebody wanted to hear a protest song from Woodstock 3, right? So I played Going Up Country, Canned Heat.
Yep.
All that music is still very, very powerful.
Yeah.
But once again, that song, we got to get out of place, very requested. Temptations music, Motown, extremely well thought of. And, of course, the Beatles and Rolling Stones. The music really keeps evolving. And like I tell people, it's amazing. Every time I hear this, every time I hear a song that we all love, it gets better like wine.
Yeah.
And music is like wine.
Yeah, it sure
music is so soothing and so healing that it'll never stop. And as long as we have an outlet for it, and I always tell people, as long as Cousin Brucie's around, you're always going to have this music as long as you want it. Music, a matter of fact, any generation's music, right, is soothing. Our generation's music, and I'm talking about 50s, 60s, 70s, that's the 3 decades that I play on the air, I think are the most soothing, most
Agreed.
medicinal, beneficial music there ever was. It's great. It has the feeling of society, has the feeling of the poets, had the feeling of the street. Always will, strong.
Who was your, and I don't mean this from a music standpoint, because I don't want to put you in that spot, because you loved all the music, whether it was the Beatles or the Beach Boys or Frankie Valli or the Temptations or, the Drifters, on and on. But what was your favorite group or favorite personality personally that you just liked?
That's a tough one. You put me against the wall, but I can answer that. But I'll have to give you multi-answers because I can't give one. I can't do Elvis. I always loved Elvis. I think if it wasn't for Elvis, I don't know if we'd be here today, along with a guy like Buddy Holly. I think their amazing contributions, rock and roll evolved. Buddy Holly, Elvis Presley. The Beatles, we've talked about it. We could talk about the Beatles for 10 more shows. I can tell you all kinds of stories, the power they had that I've experienced myself, their amazing power, like at Shea Stadium. Beatles, huge, like them. The Four Seasons, very important. Beach Boys. I mean, we're dealing with that. One of my personal loves, a group called the Drifters.
Yeah.
Amazing. And here's a great R&B mixed with rock and roll and soul and gospel, and you got the Drifters. And they've been so palatable and so delicious that I love playing their music to this very day. And I look forward to presenting them in person. Because a lot of these groups, all of the performers might not be there. They left us. They're up in rock and roll heaven. But a lot of them have survived with 1 or 2 original members.
Yeah.
And we present them. And the audience loves them because they love the tradition, the history of these groups. Now, everyone knows it's not the 5 of them together. There might be 1 or 2 left, right? And all the rest of the group is kind of new. But it doesn't matter because the group has a history. The group has a tradition that has garnered and captured our hearts. And that's what I look for when I play music. I know what my audience wants to hear. And what I do, it's funny, I'll sit here at my desk where I'm talking right now from my home in New York City, and I compose my shows. I'm very careful with what I select. So I'll sit for 2 hours putting a show together on paper. Then I put it in my computer. Now, by the time I get to that show and I get on the air in the studio, if 10% of the music I selected gets on the air, that's a lot. Because you know what I do? Yeah, I let the audience tell me what they want to hear.
That's
and
great.
I'm pretty good at it. I think I'd make a good musical bookie.
Yeah.
I'm pretty good at selecting the winners.
I love it.
The winners.
Well, Brucie, people are listening to this podcast and maybe they didn't know you were back on the air on Sirius XM and maybe, their social media. Tell them where they can find you, when they can find you, and how to find you on your social media page as well.
All right. Well, let me tell you, first of all, with Sirius XM, which is an amazing technology, as you know, I'm on Channel 6. And Channel 6 is called 60s on 6. But they've given me the opportunity to present 50s, 60s, and 70s. The show is mostly 60s based, but I play a lot of 70s and I play some 50s, depending on what the audience wants to hear. Now, I'm on Wednesday nights, 5 to 9 o'clock Eastern Time. All right? And you have to figure your own zone out. All right? And especially with podcasts, you're reaching all over like I am. I'm on Saturdays, which is really the show that has the history and the tradition, and that's on from 8 o'clock till midnight. And then Sunday, I have a show called The Best of Brucie, which is an archival show that my producers, Colton, and the staff put together. They take apart pieces, segments of shows since I've been on Sirius XM, which has been almost 15 years now.
Wow.
So there's a good 15 years of representation of interviews and telephone calls and contests and all the shtick that I get involved in. And that's kind of a fun thing to hear, too. So it's a full plate, And then during the week, I don't rest. I do shows, I do appearances, I do speeches, I do commercials. As I said, I'm very involved. I have tremendous energy, as you can hear,
Yeah.
and I don't sit down too often. I am always moving.
That's great.
And I think
Well,
that's what keeps me going.
That's what
And
keeps
the
you young.
music is so magical, and I feel good. I really feel good about what I do.
And what about your social media, your Facebook page? You have the Friends of Cousin Brucie, is that right, on Facebook?
Yeah, well, it's called the Cousin Brucie's friendship page.
Right.
Cousin Brucie's friendship page. You dial that in somewhere. And what I do is I show a lot of my personal photographs. When a guest comes up to the studio, like a Paul McCartney or a Kenny Vance or Peter Noon or any of the guys, a lot of times they sing live to me. We go on live from the studio on Facebook Live. We photograph them. They get on the air with me, and we have a good time. So the Facebook page has a lot of information on it. You know what I do? It's kind of interesting, which I love, which just shows you, as I said, the medium and the technology is so great. Facebook has Facebook Live, as you know, and it's kind of interesting. So every day before I go on the air, before I hit that button that says Brucie, you're on the air, about 3 or 4 minutes before, I go on Facebook Live.
Wow.
I talk to my cousins, and they're all used to me being on there. What I'm going to do on the show today, who my guests will be. I show pictures. I do a little show and tell, get a little silly, and have a good time. Invite everybody to tune in. Then I say I have 10 seconds left. I'll talk to you in a minute on the radio. Get off, and I go right on the air. And it works. So
How
by the
great
time
is that?
I'm on the air, a couple thousand people have seen that. And they write to me. And then on the social media, on the friendship page, I have something called a bulletin board. Cousin Brucie's bulletin board, because I from request bulletin board, because I found that the requests were all over the place on Facebook, which I still can't figure out where all these things are on Facebook. It's like so wild, right? I'm a very organized guy. I work and I lie. I'm very linear, right? So I ask everybody to put their requests and information down on the bulletin board. And there are thousands of them that get involved with that.
But Bruce, what I admire is that you embrace the history, you embrace your generation. But while you're embracing your generation, you're embracing the millennials and the generation today where you're still current. That's a beautiful thing, and I think that's a real example of what we're trying to do here on the Baby Boomer Report. Is it's okay. Let's embrace those great traditions in the past, but let's understand that we are now in the present where we need to be current, and that's what you've been able to do.
Very absolutely. Beautifully put. I love what you just said. It's essential that we retain our history and our traditions. Very nice, and pass them along, but it's also essential that we use our peripheral vision and watch what's going on today and use it, whether it be sociologically, whether it be technological, emotional, educational, politically. Know what's going on around you. You don't have to accept it, but you got to embrace it a little bit and use it. And that's exactly right. And that's what I've learned to do. So I'm a very lucky guy. Yep, I'm a good boomer.
Yeah, you are. You're a great boomer, and we are extremely honored to have had you on, Bruce, and we are just, we can't be more thankful, and we listen to you all the time, and when I told my family and my brother-in-laws and that we were going to interview you, it was like, wow. I mean, this is the rock star. Bruce Morrow's the rock star. So it's an honor, and we look forward to spending more time with you and talking to you again.
Well, listen, very honestly, Cousin Tony, my pleasure, but this was only part 1.
Excellent. We're going to do many, and part 2 we're going to do up in the studio in New York. We're going to be on that Facebook Live before you go on the air.
You got a deal. Love to have you as my guest.
All right, man. Thank you so much. You have a blessed rest of your day. Have a wonderful holiday season. And from all of us at
everybody listening, everybody involved, thank you so much for all the great times.
Thanks, Bruce. All right, buddy.
Okay, Tony.
Thank you so much. That was thank you. It was wonderful. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Enjoy yourself.
I hope Jody feels better. Bye-bye.
Thank you.